Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week, our final tier list for the Divine Set 1 week away from the release. This time, we're covering Lyrical, and I'm joined by Radiant, Deli, and Sparkelss.
Yo!
Hey guys.
Hi.
It's still the same tier list as always. We're putting them into meta, relevant, fun, need support, and irrelevant. And we're covering them in the order that they were released. So the first deck we're going to talk about is Kairi. And I think my good friend Sparkelss has a lot to say about Grade 3 Kairi.
Grade 3 Kairi. Grade 3 Kairi. It used to be so good early in the days with the 7 combo attack.
The 7 attack combo, but it wasn't that good. It was more of a fun deck. And I tried to play it at a little tournament we had in Antwerp, and it kind of sucked and fell apart. But it still has potential. It just is a bit overshadowed by a lot better Grade 3s that have been released in the meantime. And so I kind of would put it myself into irrelevance. I don't know what you're thinking.
I agree, because it's too slow. It doesn't really do anything at the moment. All the other Grade 3s are getting like their upgrade. Well, Kairi got their upgrade to a Grade 4, but they should release a new Grade 3 Kairi.
So the cool thing about Grade 3 Kairi is though that she has some Grade 2s that actually allow her to multi-attack without going into the Persona Right turn, so she actually can already do a lot of attacks without needing the Persona Right. But the issue is that she does not have power, and so any single defensive will stop you, which is kind of a big downside if you're going to commit a lot to doing a lot of attacks. So yeah. With the promo they released for Grade 4 Kairi, I think that's the deck we'll have to talk about little bit more.
Every generic lyrical card, you can just put it in there and it works. Kairi is generic. The only thing you need is the grade. You need a Kairi in the soul to have her bounce skill off. You always get +5 if you call, bouncing, multi-attack. You can even restand with Penelope. With the promo, it's a lot better. It was really slow before they had the promo, but with the promo, it makes it better. You get to Grade 4 earlier, and it's a lot better now. So I would say a big relevant. Not really meta, because for the meta, it's too slow.
So I kind of agree with that opinion as well. It's one of the few decks I actually enjoyed playing when Lyrical released, and when we finally got Grade 4 forms of different decks. The only issue I had with it that it felt kind of slow going into the later sets, and it's starting to get fixed with the new cards we're getting, like the promo that allows you to Spear Right, or even Penelope, like you said, which allows us to do some kind of multi-attack already. But I'm still quite skeptical on this deck. I feel like the +5k isn't that great anymore compared to some other power games we've gotten. So we'll have to see what the next few sets are going to bring in generic pieces, because obviously that, just like you said, the one big thing where Kairi shines, that she can just utilize pretty much anything that they'll release. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see where this deck is going. Right, the next one we have...
It's Clarissa. She's very earnest, and she needs her earnest friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Friendship is what she needs.
So
the cool thing about it is the dress-up form really fixed a lot about the deck. I was quite excited for the deck when they showed up the new card, because the on-hit ability to allow you to draw 2 cards is quite crazy. The only issue is that she still super relies on those rear guards, and if your opponent has a retire deck, you're kind of just not winning that game. And if you can't find your order, you're also just kind of not winning that game. So she has a lot of flaws that just cannot be fixed by a good Grade 3. She needs an entire wave of new rear guards to support her, and potentially just a new order. So the sad thing about this deck is I don't see it being fixed even by a single promo at this point. And so, yeah, we'll have to see if she gets better. I would put her above Grade 3 Kairi though, because she's still
better than the Grade 3 Kairi.
She still has that Persona Right availability, and if she goes off, she can still make really good numbers, but the odds of her going off are a lot lower than many other decks we're going to put on this tier list. So that's why she's still irrelevant for me.
It really comes down to the order for me.
I think last week, Rockman and I tested it because, it's a Dragon Empire inspired deck. So he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to play it. And we saw it has its positives, where it gets its draws, if it has its rear guards getting power, getting its advantage, which is all great. But if you don't see those rear guards, and they have to be unique rear guards, at least 5, to have its effect go off, if you don't see that, well, this deck isn't doing anything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Like, it has some kind of baseline for being good, but it has so many moving pieces that just kind of ruined that baseline it got. Like, I even remember back in the first Lyrical set, one of the guys at the Antwerp Locals played it quite a lot, and he just managed to keep going to deck out. The deck drew enough cards to survive, but he never had enough pieces to really push for game. So, yeah, as cool as the idea of the deck is, being like the brawlers from the original era, they really missed the ball with the rearguard requirement. Next up, Feltyrosa, a deck I haven't seen in a while.
The ghosty concept was really fun. I really liked how it's just like sending stuff to the bottom of the deck or to the top of the deck, getting different effects, getting power-ups from it, how she was getting advantage from it, and her dress-up actually like spurred that effect even more. It allowed herself to be called out as well, at the cost of not being able to call as much out. The extra drive checks were nice. But then again, you have to play around your ghosts, and they're honestly getting quite power crept at this point. And the fact that she has to do the dress-up ride to have your full momentum going means she's quite slow, and I still think she's sadly irrelevant. I would put her on the top of irrelevant, for sure, even if other decks get at it in irrelevant next. But it's just a fun, really cool deck that is struggling to keep up with the current pace.
Next up, one of my favorite decks, Loronerol. Actually, it's the second, I guess, Lyrical deck I built, because the first one was Grade 3 Kairi. But it's the first Lyrical deck I was really confident in playing. So, Loro has a really cool ability where she has a guard restrict. Even the previous form has it, where your opponent cannot use sentinels. She then also has the ability to get a critical. The older form also has the ability to get a lot of power just by restanding your other rear guards and gaining power for every one you restood. And so she has this very specific win com that's kind of, I want to say unbeatable, but we got the Blitz Order obviously that kind of just counters it entirely. But that strategy just only got stronger with the dress-up form we received and the consistency boost is received. So this is a deck I would instantly put into the fun tier. The reason I cannot put it higher right now is because it has issues with rear guards. So it does not have a lot of good rear guards, I want to say. It does have one that searches out copies of the Vanguard and another one that searches out copies of Orders. But it still needs something that kind of just pluses you in that regard, outside of during like the battle phase with the original support card that draws you 2 cards and discards 1. And so it's in this weird spot where it can totally win games that it should not be able to win just because of its guard restrict. It can also just grind out games because it gets a lot of hand size, but it gets countered so hard by decks that retire its rear guards or even just start attacking into its rear guards because you just don't have ways to recuperate that lost advantage. So I think it's a really good deck, but it has definite flaws that keep it down from being one of the better decks in the Lyrical Monasterio.
Next up, we have the second to last from the first wave, which is Alestiel, a deck that I personally really enjoy because it really gives off that Raging Form vibe. The deck really got its boost with the new Alestiel, allowing us to do the rewrite combo. And the thing is, I would definitely put it in fun. We also decided that it's above Loronerol for the time being, simply because it's early game, can scale the game immensely. If you see the right cards bound at the right time, then you can just aggro your opponent to 3 to 4 in no time. The sad thing is you are completely dependent on your black wings or white wings, so you have to be very careful to balance out your deck at the right time, which you can't always control. Also, if you don't get to see your rewrite pieces, you're in trouble as well, which is something Raging Form suffers from. But, he has his force markers to fall back on. Alestiel doesn't. If Alestiel gets stuck in her old version, then, well, she does negate power for a bit. She does gain crits, but it can definitely get fed out at that point. But it's still a fun deck. It's a really cool deck once you get to completely master it. So I would definitely put it in fun tier.
Wilista. So versatile, so amazing, so strong, so powerful. So relevant. Not meta anymore because she got hit. Well, in Japan they unbanned the restriction. But if they leave it in the English format, you still have the new cyclers from Divine set. So you just replace Vache Blanc with the new cycler. And you're fine as well. It's so versatile, you can multi-attack right from the start. It's an easy 4 or 5 attack deck. It's very powerful, you get a lot of power creep.
One thing to add to that though is that the cyclers from the Divine Set 1, they only work when they're used to ride up into the next form. So when they're discarded to ride up from your right deck, it don't work for the skill of Wilista herself. But obviously, still a lot of plussing in the early game, and it's an outlet for your energy, so that's pretty good to have anyway. And I believe the Lyrical one actually has a pretty good effect on its on-play skill.
When this unit is placed on rearguard, if you Persona Root this turn, Counterblast or Energy Blast, choose one of your units at the end of turn and gets +5, and if you choose a rearguard, return that unit to hand from rearguard at the end of that turn.
Right. And so that's pretty strong, because you have a restander in your front row that you're just going to give +5k to anyway. And so that card is going to go to your hand again, because you want to save your restanders. It's going to get the 5k twice. Well, it's going to get used out of the 5k twice. The cool thing is that the restander has a skill to bot deck the center back row card. So you either call her from hand or from deck to the back row center, giving that ability to give the +5k, and then bot deck her again with the ability of the grade 3 restander, meaning you get a lot of value out of it multiple times, and you have a perfect way to use your energy up, you have a way to use up your counterblast, and you still get that power gain you kind of gotten from Vache Blanc before. It's not a blanket effect to the front row, it's only one rearguard, but it's very similar, and I think that's a really, really cool thing they did with the energy cycler for Lyrical. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of good stuff for Wilista. Maybe she can even get pumped up to meta in the right hands, but there's one deck we know for sure that's gonna be in meta, so for now I think Wilista is fine at the top of relevant. Next up is Deli's favorite deck, Herminia.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this deck. I've been playing it since set 2 when it was completely and utter garbage. Like, it was one of the worst decks I ever touched. It since then got some very custom design cards that allow you to do things that on paper should not be allowed in this game. In the right setup you could do 5 attacks, each doing drive checks. It's very silly, but more realistically you'll be doing like 2 attacks with drive checks. As a new Herminia, like -1 to all counterblasts that you want to like use in the front row, and with counterblast the drive gainer girl, you now only need to pay 1 counterblast for a drive checks, and it's very, very good. The one gripe I have with this deck is that once you do run out of resources, you'll never gain resources ever again, and you're stuck. As that, you need to play very aggressively with this deck. You pretty much need to kill on turn 4, and you need to do it on a Persona right turn going into the new one. So ideally, go from the old Herminia into the new one, because the old Herminia has a better grade 3 turn. So you just try to you want to commit as much as possible early game, really pressure them down, and just completely aggro them, because else this deck just it runs out of resources, and that's the only thing, in my opinion, holding this deck back from being like at the tip top of like super, super good. I still think it's a relevant deck, because you sometimes can just put down so much aggro that it doesn't matter what your opponent plays, you just out-pressure them before they even get to grade 3, which in any deck is always a good thing. So I think it's a really good deck.
Yeah, I kind of want to add to that a little bit. I feel like one of the things they gave, well, there's two things they gave to this deck that allow it. There's actually three things now I think about it. They gave to this deck that allow it to do so much of early game is a grade 1 that bounces things back to hand, a grade 2 that revives something with a powerful ability, and then another grade 2 that costs from top of deck, I believe.
Yeah, it's top 5.
Top 5, right?
Takes away your soul, put you into the powerful state.
And it's just a combination of these three cards that give you such a great time doing a grade 2 turn, and then go into a big grade 3 turn, where you always just have a lot of pieces that allow you to pressure your opponent very hard. And it's like Deli says, indeed, like you have to go super hard, but the deck is kind of built for that. So if everything falls into place, you're just winning that game. Your opponent has to sack defensively to survive that, or you just have to see zero triggers. Like if your hand's only piece or something, yeah, you obviously can still die to it. But yeah, there's something about this deck that always keeps it being very scary. It does not have resources, but it doesn't need them because it has a lot of cards that are very, very free. So yeah, Herminia, it's I would actually put it above Kairi right now. I still think it's a lot scarier than some other decks purely because of that early game. It also just works greatly against Stride decks because if it were to go second against them, it can still rush them down. Your opponent will not have a great return, and you will just go all in. So I think Herminia is a lot better, but it can always, like any deck, just fall apart if you don't see the right cards. But it has a lot of tools to see those right cards, so it's very good in my opinion.
If a Stride deck decides to like grade 2 game, which I don't recommend them to, but if they do, like Herminia will always win a grade 2 game in a chance. And just that effect forces them, like you could grade 2 game them, but they don't get Stride on their first grade 3 turn. I think that is a big plus in the current metascape for this deck.
Yep, that's actually really interesting insight. I do think the dominate skill might just be a rough thing to play around, because you're always gonna have pieces on board, and they'll probably be happy to retire your pieces for you, because they'll notice that you have some really good rearguards on your field and you kind of want to keep them. But yeah, still, like you said, Kiranui generally wanted to grade 2 game while the Shoujo Doji right line was not restricted yet, and that kind of just does not work in this case, or not as well as it should.
One of our overlords of the nation.
Keep on laughing, Radiant. Keep on laughing. Fortia. I actually used...
unfortunate.
Oh, unfortunate. Oh, nice. I used to play that deck, but then I lost feeling with it. But yeah, it's good that they got a restand, and you still can keep on drive tracking. But compare it to like Luticia, it really lacks a lot. You still need a lot of friends units, which I actually love about the deck, but yeah, that makes it less consistent. If you don't have your friends units, if you play against a retire deck, you don't get there. Like a friend of mine from locals in Arnhem, he plays the deck also a lot, and I also always see that he plays the deck and then his units get retired. He can't get the things off, and yeah, it's fun, but it does need more support.
Yeah, I think it would be a bottom fun tier deck for sure, but you know, if it's still an overlord deck. If it just restands with crits and your opponent doesn't have the pieces it needs to defend, it can, you know, Melty is still a card, which gives you a lot of advantage.
That's kind of true. Plus, attacking twice with Vanguard is always good.
Yep.
And combine that with like the red OT or the blue OT, amazing.
Oh, it's my turn again, isn't it?
it's the big girl.
So at first, when I saw all the cards getting revealed for the third wave, I thought Mediell was the one that represented Keter Sanctuary, and I was I thought it was pretty cool. It had OTT-esque values, and then, oh no, this is a giant, and giants are only Keter Sanctuary. I also discovered that Mediell is actually a lyrical-based unit, and her ancestry is from Keter, so it doesn't really count apparently. I was very disappointed. Lilfa is just Bastion, but slower and less defensive-based. But for the sake of this tier list video, I ended up testing the list quite a bit. And while I, still think it needs support, it's a really fun deck. Cards such as Adelheid and Decorate Shiny Elves allow some really cool combos. Which, if you want to have a wombo combo turn with the, removing the OT to get even more attacks, you can do some insane push turns. And although the deck is quite frail, it can get very strong if it gets the support it really needs. So I'm considering putting it at the bottom of fun, but considering what is up there, I think it just needs to be in C for now. Of course, we have gotten the confirmation that it will be getting new support in the future, so I'm hopeful for it. I was very negative about this deck at first, but now, after testing it, I can see why some people really enjoy it.
She's just a big girl in a big world on a whale.
On a big old... She's a big girl on an even bigger whale.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about her.
So yeah, Mediell, our resident pharmacist. I really like the concept of the deck, but it also needs support. I would put it lower than Lilfa at this point, just purely because it's the variance that you have with the deck. It does really cool things with checking the top cards, revealing the top cards, doing combos around that. It can now do double restands with the Nectarine or Orangerine, the sunny, the blonde hair.
With the sunflowers.
The sunflower girl, yeah.
Yeah.
She's really good, but I mean, it's you need to check the top card of your deck. You need to be reliant on those rear guards. You need to hope that you see those triggers. Her skill is currently Counterblast 2. It can be reduced. It needs a lot more for the payoff that you're getting, which is a shame. So with the right support, which again it will be getting in the future, I'm sure it might end up being a stronger deck, but for now it's struggling to keep up, so I would definitely put it in needs support.
But then there's Bunny Girl.
Haseritt.
I don't know, man. It's the same as Chow Chow from Bermuda Triangle, putting units at bottom deck, draw extra cards and stuff. Didn't like it back then, still don't like it. You don't really see it anymore.
Right, yeah, I tried it when it first released, and I actually thought it was actually really interesting, because it has one really cool support card that allows you to superior call cards from deck with specific attack values, which allows it to build around some very unique cards they've released over time in Lyrical. The only flaws I saw back then was that the power was a bit low, and I still think that's the issue right now. So she definitely needs more support to be relevant, but she's actually pretty fun to play if you like a Spike Brothers-like playstyle. And because the units you attack with go to the bottom of your deck, and you draw different cards, you're actually more likely to draw into more defensive cards, so to say, like PGs and triggers. So the way she plays is pretty interesting, but yeah, she's not as amazing as she can be. I also believe her regular skill gives power to the board, and that skill is pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I agree. She's definitely like early Spike Brother-esque, like, and I think she give like 5 rewards, like +2, just to...
Yeah, that's what I meant. So it's only +2k, which is kind of weird, and I get it because she synergizes with cards that don't have regular attack values, so she kind of fixes their attack values. And then if she chose at least 3 cards, she gets +10k, which is also pretty cool. But it's still kind of gimmicky. right? It's not enough power to justify running weird numbers. She needs more support to kind of flesh out that entire playstyle. And she already got a couple of cool cards, because if any of the cards she puts back already has an ability that they would draw a card, then she draws 2 cards from them, so she can plus quite a lot. But if you kind of need Persona right to really make all of that work well.
I've only faced it like twice, and both of the times were a BSF or BCS, like either one. And my opponent was like, "Oh yeah, I really like Spike Brothers. Oh, that's cool. So is this just as good as Spike Brothers? Only if I luck sack." And they're like, "Oh, come on. No, now you're making me sad." Yeah, you know, I hope this deck gets better, especially for the Spike Brother players, because, you know,
it's like much more Spike Brothers than Bruce ever will be.
Agreed.
Right, next up, Kyouka. It's
No.
one of the cooler decks, in my opinion, that they've
No.
released in Lyrical.
No.
And the reason, the reason for that is he has a restander that is not restricted to your opponent's grade. So as long as you have a grade 3 Vanguard, she can do 5 attacks. And that obviously costs you a Counter Blast and a Soul Blast for every restand, but she can go insane if she has the right pieces and if she goes first. The issue is that she needs those pieces, and currently I believe she does not really have the tools to very consistently get all of those pieces. Her skill to check the top 5 and superior call something from a certain grade or add the order to her hands is kind of bad, because you have to call whatever you're gonna call before. You have to call a number to decide what grade you're gonna call, and if you call the wrong thing and only check triggers in your top 5, you're kind of like, yeah, I guess it kind of sucks. They did, however, already fix one thing about her, and that's that they added more grade 1s to support the archetype. In the latest Lyrical set, I think that was Lyrical 4, they added a grade 1 that goes into the soul at the end of the turn and gives you a draw. So that's really good, because that refunds her soul she needs for her Vanguard ability, and then instantly allows you to run cards like the grade 2 cycle cards that Soul Blast when they're discarded during the right phase. And so she's getting a lot of more tools to fix her entire playstyle. And so that's why I would put her right now in need support, but on the high end, because she can just totally blow up her opponent away if she sees the right pieces, and if she checked a trigger, that restander is gonna be massive, because it already gets plus 5k from its own effect, then a plus 10k from the order, so they're instantly hitting for something like 25k. 35k on a grade 2 Vanguard is pretty lethal. So yeah, they're really strong, but the one thing I want to say though is we already know that she's getting support in the Divine set too, and the support is kind of crazy. So she might as well jump up to relevant once that support releases, because it's looking really good. I don't know if anyone else wants to add something about this.
I do not like her vibe. I will never like her.
I do agree with Radiant on that.
We are the anti-Kyouka committee.
Doesn't Sparkelss have this card in like a
I sold
rarity?
I sold it, but I do still own a digital art of that. I still do own the LSR digital art. Number something.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
It actually is, but I must say the LSR art, it's pretty. It's
right?
pretty.
It gives you vacation vibes.
Yeah, but that's all I'm gonna say about it.
I
do want to say more, but
I hate about this deck though. There's one big thing I hate about this deck though. It's her grade 0 art. For some reason, they drew the foot wrong, and it's the other way around. And so, whenever I look at that art, I'm like, yeah, I want to replace this with something else because it looks so wrong.
no, sorry,
it's
grade
just-
2 hot stuff.
Oh, let's skip it from there. I hate hot
Yeah.
stuff.
Let's cut off. We don't have to talk about Kyouka anymore. Going right into Michu. And so, yeah, that's another deck I've tested recently and was amazed by. The deck is quite insane with the new grade 2 promo it got. So, the big thing about Michu is that she swaps with her back row grade 1 rearguard. But the cool thing is, she has an order that allows you to pass out power. And so she can put a lot of power on that grade 1 in the back row. Then first boost with it, making her a pretty big swing. Afterwards swap with it, and now she has a new Vanguard that's pretty big as well. And so she has a lot of power going for her. The new promo allows her to draw a little bit more. And so all the tools she have made me realize that she's actually a really good deck. Also the great one, it's called Noko. When you put an order into your order zone, sets order into the order zone, she can be revived for, I believe, Soul Blast 1, which allows you to actually immediately, if you open her, get a booster for your Vanguards on one of the early turns, and just put a lot of pressure out that way. So Michu has a lot of good things going for it. It also has pretty big rearguards because you just pass around 30k casually with your Vanguard skill. And I believe the new order also just gives even more power around. So yeah, this deck is really good. It has pulsing and power, and pretty much those are the two big things you need in Vanguard. So I would go and put her into the fun tier. Probably above Loro as well.
I think it would be the top fun one.
Yeah. She is really good, and she will surprise pretty much any opponent you put her against. She's also not that piece reliant. I suppose you do need to open Noko or find a way to add her. So the right line has a way to add her, and that's from top 5, I believe. So it's not super consistent to find her, but you will run her the great one at 4 copy. So generally, if you mulligan for it, you should be able to find it. If you can't find it, the game kind of sucks though. That's kind of the thing. If you can't do the swap, you're kind of not doing your main game plan.
I'm also very glad to see that she's the first of the Lyrical 3 wave to not be a need support.
She's also one of the few ones that actually got support.
She did get really good promos and good support, but also a side note, she did also get those alt arts with the collab. It's better to run the normal version than to run the collab version, especially once set 2 rolls around, because Blindmeyer does turn off the fact that she takes over the name for Michu. So run the normal ones.
That's so sad. I hope ban Blindmeyer.
No, it's fine. Blindmeyer is fine. Don't worry about it.
They might just actually like errata it, like that skill cannot be taken off.
Just make it the same card.
Yeah.
Make it so it can be turned off, because that seems so wrong that they could do that.
I mean, that's more power to Michu herself. That's what I think about it. She deserves it.
Next up, Luticia. The
Luticia.
second Overlord in Lyrical.
The better one.
Yeah, definitely a better one. She's incredibly fun. I recently started playing her. I really like the aesthetic the most, but she's clearly from Dark States, let's be honest. But yeah, I ended up playing her after all, and I didn't regret it for a second. It's definitely irrelevant, especially with the new promo, allowing you to get her, requirement for 4 of the Cursed Place into her soul, and it's just it does what it needs to do. At this point, you also got Strega, who gives you your other disadvantage that you barely had the pieces for a field. You have Soul Aplenty, especially with the new order, especially with your other grade 2, which gets power. Strega gets power. You have a good front row rear guard. So, and then all you need to do is just swing twice with Luticia herself. I don't know how else you could feasibly improve this. I think her biggest downside is that your hand is usually pretty small, because you have to commit quite a lot to get those orders active. She's getting support. Her dress up will probably do something that's just as good. If we get something like what's her name, Veleno? If we get something like that allows you to play a second Blitz order in your opponent's turn, then this deck is all the way up into relevant or meta. Because an Overlord that's both defensively and offensively strong, what else can you ask for?
Petralka, man, I kind of hate this card for one simple reason. I had a nightmare about it when Deli slept over at my place, and for some reason I dreamt that he just kept winning against me with this deck because it got power every time it rerolled, but it doesn't. It doesn't do much actually. It's just like a bad version of what Highlander wants to be, but it's fixable. Right now, it does not really have that much of its own support. I believe it got one promo that just counts as itself, so you have more targets to rewrite into.
You actually
But
have
it kind
8
of
targets
just
now.
needs, yeah, 8 targets indeed. So it kind of just needs some kind of great one. It also just has the Highlander clause saying that you can run 4, but it does not count as being the same card or something. That just says whenever you rewrite, your front row has +10. And that way you will get a lot of power, since it does not plus all that much either, unless you run generic plussing cards that Lyrical does have access to. Just to have a win con, because just rewriting your vanguards and swinging again is fine, but it's not scary. Definitely not if you have decks like Luticia that just do a much better vanguard restand with a little bit more power and a little bit more plussing, where Petralka is just RNG, and you hope to do it once, and if you're lucky you do it twice, but she's very irrelevant. I would even put her below Kairi Grade 3, and it's simply because Kairi Grade 3 at least can do 7 attacks, so if you persona right, you're gonna be pretty sure that you're gonna do a really, really good turn, where with Petralka you never know if you're gonna do a good turn.
That's true.
Yeah, that's kind of why I don't really like this deck. I also just read every single Lyrical card to be able to build the deck, and that's the biggest mistake I've ever made, so yeah, Petralka sucks.
Reading
I don't know if Deli wants to add anything to it. He was there when we read the cards.
Yeah, we did read all the cards, and I'll never forget that evening, because I think we both lost our mind.
We
That's why
definitely
you got the
did.
nightmare.
Yeah. It's all connected.
Yeah, let's just forget about this thing's existence. Actually got a completely new promo boss recently, so I think they did forget shit Petralka exists.
They don't care about her anymore. They don't want to print that. What's the name of the card that's generally run in Highlander? That's really popular. Yeah, they just need to print a Q-tire for her, and then maybe she's gonna be also relevant. Although I doubt it, because there's really not that many good targets yet that really push her strategy more so than just anything generically that could push any strategy Lyrical has access to.
We just
I
need
think
more
that's-
generic cards.
I think that's enough about Petralka.
Next we have Charmout, the French girl that I guess is pretty decent. It's actually a good deck, but ironically, arguably a meta deck, but I think it has something that keeps it down into relevant. So the main game plan of the deck is that you boost your Vanguard's power as big as possible, and then you copy your Levrecheur's rear guard with the same power as your Vanguard. And if she has 33k or greater, the back row behind Vanguard can actually like do a drive check and attack from back row. It's very neat, especially when you run the red OT, which allows a rear guard to restand. And then if you somehow sack into that, you can actually restand the thing that drive checks and do 2 drive checks, which is pretty cool. Besides that, it just makes big columns. So it's 4 attacks, that's like 60k ideally, but realistically you won't get there until turn 4. For that, you kind of just play a okay deck that tries to make decent columns and do 3 attacks. You have some draw power by putting things into your soul, which helps, you know, because she can call out the Levrecheur's from her soul. So it's a pretty decent and like a resource loop. But at the end of the day, the fact that she only does 3 hopes to do 4 attacks is what, in my opinion, really holds this deck back right now. Because her rear guards, and I think I said this before, but a 3 attack deck really needs crits on rear guards, in my opinion. And this deck doesn't have that, so it kind of has to rely on that back row attack and the fact that there's a clause on that. And I've seen it whiff more times than I'd like to admit. Like, I've played against this deck quite a bit now. If you don't get that 33k, this deck is miserable, and it's just not good enough. That being said, if you do get there, deck's really good. Deck is really good. Now that's my 2 cents on Charmout.
But isn't it like pretty easy to get to 33k?
You'd think so, right? But it's actually not as easy as you think. You have to specifically like run cards that give you +5, +10, and then you have to hope that you actually have those cards. But you don't want to run too many of those cards because you just need to really run your other combo pieces and your leversers, and then you need to run X amount of other cards that are actually like just support for Charmout, and it just becomes a mess. That being said, on a Persona right turn, it is pretty easy to get to 33, which is why turn 4 you're pretty much guaranteed. But if you don't get it on turn 3, I think that's one of the more important things in this deck, is that you need to get that 33k on turn 3, actually like be on curve and like really push the deck high enough that it can combat some of these meta threats, like the strike decks. I think that's my main gripe with this deck. Next is Fennel. Fennel is an interesting one, because he's kind of miserable, and at the same time I think she has potential. And we've actually recently seen her perform in tournaments in Japan on set 2, because of some people cooking really hard. I want to say she needs support. I don't think she's very good right now. The main thing that she does is like she plays this trick or treat order like 3 times in a row. When she does, she gets power up to the number of, like she gives the front row power up to the number of trick or treats and drops times 2000, and then gives herself another unit of crits. I think that's mainly the reason people like her right now, because she gives that crit pressure to herself and a rear guard, which is kinda scary, depending in the right circumstances. She can play Strega, which is a really good resource engine card, and now it has some decent pieces like a good shielder. It has some okay stuff, but I think it needs a little bit more to really shine.
I think she would be slightly higher than either Haseritt or Mediell. I'm not sure if she... I literally haven't faced it yet. I've seen it at locals, but it never reached me, so I don't know if it's... all I know from, is what people tell me about it, and yeah, I think it sounds fun, but yeah, I don't know. I really can't say anything about it at this point.
It just needs support.
It needs support.
Well, next up, Radiant.
Siana, I like, Greek mythology, and Gorgons are definitely part of Greek mythology, so I had to try this deck out. And sadly, she also suffers from, not having enough defensive options beyond its gimmick, but it's super cool. Like, I can't stress enough how fun this deck is. Messing with your opponent, seeing if they have to discard pieces, or if they have any sort of way of stopping your binding mechanic. So this deck can do some really cool things. It can actually reach numbers, especially with the support it has. The bounce mechanic on your opponent's side of the field is also pretty funny. So the guard restrict, it takes some getting used to if you're facing it. So people that face this deck a lot actually end up getting pretty used to it in the end. So I'm pretty happy that I'm I think it got a promo that allowed it to go a bit harder.
It did.
But yeah, it's a really fun deck, and I'm looking forward to what kind of support it will get. But at the moment, it's just squarely a fun deck. It can surprise somebody who hasn't faced it. So I definitely wouldn't put it any lower than it currently is, because, you know, if you're not prepared to face this, and your deck, you know, might be good against it, might not be, you know, depending on how reliant you are on your rear guards or on your hand pieces, then you might be in a very, you know, difficult time facing this deck if you are not prepared.
Yeah, I think it's like a noob buster, as they call it. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna struggle a bit. But if you're like comfortable and you understand what you're facing, you'll have a better time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a deck that allows a player to grow as a card fighter just by facing it.
Alright, moving on to Prism. Prism is a surprise to me, because I think it's our only meta lyrical deck. And it's kind of wild to me how good this deck actually ended up being. I got to try it a bit, I borrowed it from my friend. Darn, this deck just draws so much. Everything on, like, in the archetype just says draw, and sometimes you just sit there with 14 cards in hand. The Prism cards get extra shield, so you're super tanky. Not only that, but everything bounces back to hand, so you actually have a crazy good matchup into the current best deck, which is Shiranui, which I also think is one of the bigger reasons that this is like the meta deck right now, is that it just has such a good matchup into Shiranui, being able to leave nothing on board going into that first grade 3 ride, and when going first, you know, being able to bounce back everything and still do 5 attacks in that first grade 3 turn. It's really impressive, it really is. Along with that, it also gets a crit on Vanguard, which is always good. It has multi-attack, it has drawing, it just has everything a good deck kind of wants to have. I don't have anything bad to say about it, really. It even has resource management card in the grade 1 Prism, where just when you bounce a counter charge if you haven't yet this turn, and soul charge, which is just amazing because you don't need to worry about any resources at all while playing this deck. It's one of the decks of all time.
Yeah, this deck reminded me why I dislike Bermuda Triangle. But in all seriousness, like, the best thing you can do facing this deck is, if you have early game, abuse the hell out of it. Use that early game to find your footing, rush this deck, because in the late game it will indeed start drawing, it will start stabilizing, it will start hitting you harder and harder. This is a deck that can grind you down if it has to, just by its sheer number of, you know, versatility. So while they're still setting up, you need to make sure to rush this deck down. This is especially why, like, the Stride deck sets suffer against it, because they don't, you know, get the chance to abuse that much. But there are decks in the meta that will be able to, you know, make use of that fact, and that's how this deck will, you know, it's hard to say. I dislike it because it's so strong, but at the same time, it's not unfairly strong. It has its weakness, like, in a respectful way, and it definitely deserves its slot where it currently is.
Okay, moving over to Pacifica. I failed to say disappointment, but I expected this deck to be a lot better on release than it actually is. It has a lot of draw power, which is really good. It has 5 attacks, which is really good. It gains a good amount of power from its rear guards and its own effects, which is really nice. But somehow it just manages to feel a bit clunky while playing it, and like it's sometimes difficult to manage for counterblast, and It's you run out of Pacificas, then you want to admit, and if you draw into too many Pacificas at the start of the game, you're gonna suffer way too hard. And so in one of my games, I entered my grade 3 turn with 5 Pacificas in hand, and I could just feel the game slipping out of my grasp. A part of that is because the right line is really good. It adds a bunch of Pacificas to your hand. They get like a check top 7 to add 2. I could be wrong on the exact numbers, but you can add 2 of them.
Yeah.
That's true, that's true. And they don't need to be different Pacificas, which is also very nice.
Yeah, which is really good for the deck, but then you clog your hand down with grade 3s, which yeah, you can filter it out by calling the non-Vanguard Pacifica. But it felt a lot better on release while I was testing it than it does now, and now it feels a bit clunky. I don't really know how to put it. I hope this deck gets some more support. I would mainly like to see a countercharger, personally.
But it has a countercharger already.
A better counter.
Yeah, more of it needs a good promo.
The on boost countercharger it's too late and doesn't flow right.
You know, since you guys, both of you play this deck, both of you really like this deck, I am scared why you guys put it under Alestiel, because the numbers, as much as this deck does have its downsides, those numbers are nothing to scoff at. It can just keep punishing you, and I don't like getting punished by this deck. So
Right.
I personally
I
want
totally want to add to that. It just pluses a lot on top of all those numbers. So I feel like it's also a lot better than some of the other decks we put in fun. But maybe that's just our opinion as opponents rather than as players of the deck. That it looks really scary when you're facing it.
It's really the resource management. That's the whole problem.
Yeah.
It's a good problem to have. I think it should be higher.
Yeah, we could put
Like-
it high. Put it here. I wouldn't put it any higher than that.
I agree.
Like, Pacifica is really good, but the resource management, if you don't have the other Pacifica on hand, you really miss the attack combo.
Right, and then you just need a lot of CB to even get a chance to do whatever your deck needs to do.
Yeah.
If you don't get the second Pacifica by your turn 3 right, you might as well scoop at that point. Without that thing, you're a 3 attack deck, and you just don't do anything worthwhile. You don't even get power, because the power gainer actually comes from back row attacks. You get like +5 from every back row attack. And if you don't do back row attacks, then you just swing 13, 10, 10, and call it a day.
Right. So it definitely has its flaws if it doesn't see pieces, but it has the right setup to see those pieces. Generally, that's I guess that's a big thing from a lot of the lyrical decks we've spoken about. They're all kind of piece reliant in some sense. They need their combo pieces to go off.
100%. Yep.
Right. Next up, we have the quick start deck boss, Marlean, I believe is her name.
Marlean.
Marlean. She's the upgraded form of Kairi grade 3 in the biggest sense of the word, because she does not have a grade restriction or a persona right restriction. She just bounces something from your field and calls something with grade 3 or less from your hand and gets it plus 10k. So she's surprisingly generically good already. All she really needs is something that gives her that 5th attack, and I believe that already exists. Sadly, I haven't tested with her myself, but I see the potential, so I'm quite interested to see what this deck can do in the future. Right now, the main combo I noticed was with Kyouka bouncing something, and then her bouncing the other front row, then calling a grade 1, I believe it was. That's 3k base. That then for Soul Blast Superior call something from the top of your deck, and that way it gives you 5 attacks, but then that grade 1 is only 13k, and whatever you're gonna call is also probably gonna be anywhere from 8k to 13k. So you still need your persona rights. The cool thing though is it adds its own persona right, so it is capable of just plussing a lot of what it generally does. And so yeah, I'm waiting to see what this deck is going to bring. It has a lot of potential.
Yep.
It gets support. It's a big if,
Right.
man.
It's a very big if. The one support card they made for her in the first set of Divines is really not what she needs, so let's hope they give her another thing that just does what she wants to do, which is multi-attack, obviously, and do decent multi-attack, not like scuffy multi-attacks.
Talking about
She'll get there.
decks that don't multi-attack or have very scuffed multi-attacks, it's one of my recent guilty pleasures. It is Krysrain. God, where do I even put you? You're special. I'll put you here.
Special needs, you mean?
Well, she do have some needs though.
Don't say that, man. Come on. I really like Krysrain. I think it's the second lyrical deck where I was really like, oh my god, I really enjoy playing this. Like after this deck kind of is a turtle deck where you can tank through quite a lot of punishment, like attacks, but you also attack at the rate of a turtle, and that you just don't attack at all. And it's terrible, man. It's a 3-attack deck with honestly not that great numbers. Outside of its
True.
divine skill, it doesn't really do much. Its divine skill is decent, I'll admit. It's not bad. It bounces all cards to hand and then calls a card from hand, copies its power and crits, like the Vanguard's power and crit, which is nice if you see triggers. If you see triggers, it's really nice, but if you don't, come on guys, give Krysrain a triple drive. That's all I'm asking you for.
Give it an upgrade.
The best
To
card
be
in the
fair-
deck, in my opinion, right now, is the Great One. That when you boost if you don't PG, they have to guard with 3 different grades. I think it's a really strong effect, basically like forcing them to PG. But if they have the PG, it doesn't really matter, kind of thing, because they'll probably PG anyway, because it's the only real scary swing in the deck.
It's a big letdown.
To be fair, like, now this is already outside of what this tier list tries to do, but we see there is hope. We see the grade 2, and that grade 2 is better than what we expected, because you did test that one, and it got its scary turn, so I'm hopeful that this deck might end up, by the next time we do this, it will definitely be up somewhere.
We hope.
Okay, so
Right?
Francetta makes the deck fun at best, and it's a nice piece, but I think other decks actually use it better than Krysrain herself, and that makes me depressed.
Right. A big thing though, her design is so limiting that I feel like she's set up to get a lot of good support in the future.
Yeah,
Because of the way they build her, she's probably gonna get more multi-attack just from good rearguards anyway. And that's instantly gonna push her up on the tier lists, because then she'll be able to maybe go to 6 attacks at some point. So there's a lot of things for Krysrain that can go well if they decide to give her the support she truly needs. And it's kind of cool to see that already with that Francetta card, that she can go into the fun tier. So I'm waiting to see what this deck will bring, but it's probably one of the few decks to look out for in Lyrical, because it could get really good support.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for it.
Yeah, but I hope you guys have your Cycler cards, your Flash Blancs, because my god. If you don't, you better sell your liver. That deck is gonna have a pricey price tag.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Pushy,
Have you
please.
sold yours yet?
Reprint those Cycler cards. We need those reprinted.
No, just let it be, because we have 4, so that's fine.
Deli doesn't.
Oh, you.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, Deli.
You're probably the only one that has 4.
It's
I would
actually
love
kinda
to play
true,
this deck, and I won't just because I know I will never be able to get Flush Blancs or be able to afford Flush Blancs right now. It's just,
Like, what's the price of her?
I don't know, but it's more than I'm willing to pay for it.
Just to cut in real quick, False Blanc at the moment is 62 euros.
It's stupid. I'm looking at it right now.
I am
Yeah,
so
so-
happy that I bought them.
So I will now
We-
be playing this deck.
Well, if you want to play the 4 copies we have, we can share. So
Ah.
it's still possible to like play with Krysrain. So
We'll see. He gets 4-12 support.
Ultimate entry in this tier list. Damn it.
time to put the tree in the trash.
Burn the dragon tree. Well, I don't think any of us really think the lyrical OT is scary enough to. Well, it's a very scary overtrigger. Let's just not put it like that. But it's not something that's worth it on turn 6 or 7. I don't remember what turn dragon tree activates. I think it's turn 6, right?
5 now.
Oh, yeah, 5, right, because you turbo it 1 turn. Anyway, it's still a bit slow for what it wants to do. The one cool thing, though, is that Lyrical has some cool early game cards, but none of them are available to the Dragon Tree, so they would only activate on turn 3 onward. So, yeah, it's very janky to try and get this to work in Lyrical. Even though it has good generics, there really is no big payoff where you want to go into the Dragon Tree.
The worst part is, this nation also does not have like Dragon Tree wretches. So how are you going
Hold
to
up.
get your? It doesn't. This is the only nation that has 0 Dragon Tree wretches.
Yeah,
I literally thought they got them together with Keter and Dragon Empire, but they didn't. That's crazy.
no. Lyrical is the only nation that doesn't work with the tree.
The whale dodged the wretches.
Well,
Yeah.
guys,
It is 3-Dio, guys.
I hope you all enjoyed the lyrical tier list. Please leave a comment down below and tell me how wrong my opinion is.
Also,
bye.
please donate for Deli's singing lessons. He needs it. But with
like,
Really do love-
subscribe in the description down below, and support our friend Deli with singing lessons.
So we can send him to Lyrical Monasterio.
where he
Guys, I get
belongs.
bullied here. Someone help me.
Send help.
With all his
Also-
Firefly girls.
Without further ado, a big shout out to our sponsor,